So we'll have to dig deeper into our pockets to fund traveling expenses. Rather, a massive fuel hike is expected this week, with a litre of petrol likely to top 25 rand. The Automobile Association's Layton joins us now. Layton, always good to chat to you. Is it time to dust up, or just remove the dust rather, from that bicycle?
Well, I think for many people it may not be an option anymore. I think a lot of people are considering the alternatives that are there for them in terms of their transport needs. Many people, I think, are also looking at public transport where it's available, affordable and reliable in their areas. And we know, unfortunately, that that's not always the case. Our advice, obviously, to motorists is use your vehicle sparingly. Now, that's not advice that's going to suit everybody. But it may require negotiation with an employer to find out whether you can, work different hours to avoid the traffic in the mornings and the evenings when you go home and come to work, perhaps even working from home 1 or 2 days a week. These are the types of things we're not only seeing happening in South Africa, but we're seeing them in other places in the world where rising fuel costs are putting a lot of pressure on cost of living costs as well. So, these are the types of things that we would advise people to do.
And that's just it, right? So watching the news yesterday and a number of international channels, you observe whether they were in Seoul, in South Korea, there were protests. People protesting, wanting better wages in Germany, in Libya, in Argentina, just merely complaining about the cost of living, and some just complaining about inflation that has gone up. And so when we take a look at South Africa, we're not the exception to the rule because of what is happening between Russia and Ukraine.
No, we're certainly not the exception at all. We obviously in South Africa have a unique set of challenges, and those exacerbate the problems that we have in terms of cost of living increases. We know we've got a very high unemployment rate, and that leads obviously to a high poverty rate. There's a very high disparity. The poverty gap, the poverty wealth gap in South Africa is very high. So obviously these are having a different impact on a country like South Africa. But certainly we're not isolated in terms of these cost of living expenses. We see in many places in the world people are having to cut back on their energy needs because they can't afford them on a regular basis. People are having to cut back on transport. People are having to rejig their budgets and to cut certain things from their monthly expenses to accommodate for these rising cost of living expenses as a result of rising fuel, which we know is as a result of what's happening in the Ukraine. So, yes, you're absolutely correct. And, you've mentioned a handful of countries there. There are many, many other countries where people are experiencing exactly the same problems that we are in terms of this rising cost just to stay alive and get around every day.
Does the fuel levy help?
Yeah, the fuel levy is a very difficult question to answer. There's been a number of calls, for the fuel levy to be scrapped. Our view as the AA is that, if government were to decide to scrap that levy, we run the risk of them looking for that income through other sources. It generates 90 billion rand to the fiscus annually. Now, any government that gets that on a regular basis, and it's an easy tax to collect, it's one of the top 5 taxes that government actually does collect. Now, government would be loath to just kind of do away with that and not replace it somehow. So our concern is that if the fuel levy is scrapped, we may see increases to existing taxes. We may see new taxes being introduced to cover that shortfall of 90 billion rand that it generates annually. It's a very tricky situation. Certainly from our point of view, there are other measures government must take to deal with the rising fuel costs, and one of those is a very urgent need for a review of the fuel price where all of its components are interrogated, where the calculations are audited to ensure that they are correct, and whether all of those components that comprise the fuel price currently are still necessary to be on the fuel price. Our big concern is the disparity between the basic fuel price and the import parity price, which is the price that we paid to bring that fuel into the country in the first place. So we believe there is space to do that review, and we think it should happen as soon as possible.
Layton, always a pleasure. Layton Beard is with the Automobile Association. Thank you.